Lenovo is a technology company from China that is globally recognized for making personal computers. In fact, they manufacture more PCs than any other company in the world, responsible for something like a quarter of them. All the way back in 2013, they took over that #1 spot from HP and have held on to it ever since. You know, I believe this is the first Chinese company that I have featured on this channel, partially because most of them are not very well known in the United States, or most other parts of the world for that matter, with Lenovo being one of the few that have achieved this level of global recognition. They operate in over 180 countries around the world, with almost a dozen manufacturing sites found in places like Brazil, India, Mexico, Japan, and the United States. They even have two separate headquarters, one in Beijing, China, and one in Mooresville, North Carolina. They employ around 72,000 people and claim to serve millions of customers every day, which is believable. Fortune's Global 500 list ranks them as the 196th largest company in the world based on sales of almost $70 billion, which has more than tripled since the first time they made that list in 2011. So already here, you might be thinking that Lenovo is bigger than you realized, and they have gotten to that point in some unexpected ways. I do not think there's another story out there quite like this one, so in this video, I want to discuss some of the key aspects of their growth while highlighting what I believe to be some of their most interesting sales categories. Starting things off, where else but with personal computers? And trust me, there's a lot to say here. In the 1980s, the Chinese government had recently cut back on subsidies for higher learning, so the Chinese Academy of Sciences, which was controlled by the government, invested the equivalent of about $25,000 to start a small business that would hopefully help fund their operations. That business adopted the name Legend Group early on, and in the beginning, it was essentially a small group of engineers working out of a two-room guardhouse in Beijing, but in 1988 they had their first minor success. They built some kind of a language expansion card that would allow IBM-compatible PCs to process Chinese characters. I guess it won the National Science Technology Progress Award in China. Remember, this was the 1980s, when IBM PCs and eventually IBM compatibles, or clones, dominated the PC market. Without getting too sidetracked here, IBM released their first PC in 1981, and it revolutionized the industry as we know it. As you might expect in that situation, it wasn't long before countless other businesses started capitalizing on it, commonly reverse engineering it and creating a clone that was compatible with the same software. For example, Compaq was among the first to do it, and as a side note, was later acquired by HP in 2001, which is how they originally became the market leader. But going back to Legend Group, in 1988 they released that Chinese character card for IBM clones, and 2 years later they released their own IBM clone. The rapidly growing PC market, combined with government efforts to hinder foreign competition, helped Legend sell over 1 million units throughout the early 1990s. And by 1997 they passed IBM themselves to become the best-selling PC maker in China. Now, by 2003, having already dominated their local market, Legend wanted to make an aggressive push outside of their home country, and the first step in doing that was to change their name. Because, well, Legend is not very distinct. It is a common word that was already used by a bunch of other companies. According to their CEO at the time, on our way to becoming internationalized, we need to have an English brand name that can be used unrestrictedly in markets worldwide. However, the original English name, Legend, has been registered by others in many countries. So, for the new name, they settled on Lenovo, combining the LE left over from Legend with the Latin word novo, meaning new. The following year, it was big when they announced that they would be acquiring IBM's PC business for $650 million in cash, $600 million in stock, and $500 million in assumed liabilities. It was a deal totaling over $1.7 billion that made IBM Lenovo's second largest shareholder, owning 18.9% of the business. As you could imagine, this was shocking news that attracted a lot of attention within the industry. It was a relatively small small company affiliated with the Chinese government that was almost completely unheard of in the US, taking over a legendary American PC brand. However, I want to be clear that IBM PCs in 2004 were not quite what they used to be in the 1980s. Their market share was steadily declining to a point where Dell and HP had become so much more popular. And all of that competition meant that margins were declining, so IBM wanted to focus on more profitable parts of their business, like servers and software. But meanwhile, the unknown Lenovo brand wanted to take advantage of the IBM brand that was still highly recognizable with a strong reputation, specifically their ThinkPad laptops that were made for business use. I mean, Chinese companies tend to have a reputation for producing lower quality products, and this was a perfect way to avoid that perception. In the end, the deal combined Lenovo's $3 billion a year PC business, mostly in China, with IBM's $9 billion a year PC business that was worldwide. It instantly made them 4 times bigger, gave them credibility, and provided a solid foundation for them to grow their PC business in new markets. Shortly after, they had a lot of exposure when they partnered with the Olympics in Italy in 2006 and then again in their home country in 2008. By heavily advertising that Lenovo brand, they were able to phase out the IBM brand that they were licensed to use for the first few years. And they have since remained fairly active with sports partnerships, including FIFA, Formula One, the Dallas Cowboys. In 2024, they made a deal with Madison Square Garden and the New York sports teams, even down to the local sports teams near their headquarters in North Carolina. Today, more of their revenue comes from the Americas than anywhere else, but it is a fairly even distribution, meaning they have succeeded with their goal of becoming a global brand. Like I said, they became the world's biggest PC maker in 2013, and it has remained that way. However, 2013 was a particularly bad year for the PC market that has continued to decline, at least partially due to the rising popularity of tablets and smartphones. So, Lenovo figured that they probably shouldn't be that reliant on PCs, motivating them to expand and strengthen their presence in other areas, leading to some more unexpected parts of their business. Would you believe that 47% of the revenue comes from non-PC sales, coming from categories like the next one on my list, servers? And just so everyone's on the same page here, so far in this video I've been talking about personal computers, obviously meant for individuals, while servers are much larger, more powerful computers that are generally used by businesses. Well, in 2014, Lenovo acquired IBM's lower-end x86 server business in a cash-and-stock deal valued at over $2 billion. That was reported as the largest technology acquisition by a Chinese company. Yet again, IBM wanted to focus on higher margin parts of their business, while Lenovo has always been more about volume. The previous year, they had reported less than a 20% profit margin, so it was a logical expansion for them. The deal raised their share of the server market from 2% to 14%, and they expressed plans to eventually become the market leader, much like what they had just accomplished with personal computers. According to a VP of the company at the time, Lenovo has big plans for the enterprise market. Over time, we will compete vigorously across every sector using our manufacturing scale and operational excellence to repeat the success we have had with PCs. They have since branded these products under the name ThinkSystem and currently report that almost 20% of their sales come from their infrastructure solutions segment. I say that this is a lesser known part of their business because most of the public does not typically encounter business servers, but I think it is interesting that the top PC maker has also become very heavily involved in making these much larger computers. Another category that has become significant to Lenovo is phones. They actually first started selling cell phones in 2002, back when they were still known as Legend and isolated to the Chinese market. Oddly enough, they sold their mobile phone division in 2008 so they could better focus on their rapidly growing PC business, only to buy it back about a year and a half later for twice as much as they had sold it for. I guess they reassessed and saw potential for it as a complementary business, but remained mostly isolated to the Chinese market until 2014, right around the same time as that IBM server acquisition. Lenovo acquired Motorola Mobility. It's a little tricky here, but in 2011, after struggling to capitalize on the smartphone transition in the market, Motorola split their mobile phone business into its own company that was then acquired by Google, who then sold it to Lenovo in a deal worth almost $3 billion. It resulted in Google owning almost 5% of Lenovo, and the whole situation is shockingly similar to the IBM PC acquisition. Much like IBM did with PCs, Motorola played a key part in popularizing cell phones. They're even credited with inventing them. But after failing to keep up with competition, mainly from Apple and Samsung, their market share fell drastically, but Motorola was still a highly recognizable name in the industry. So with this acquisition, Lenovo was able to break into the global cell phone market, where they have since maintained a significant presence. Notably, in early 2020, they relaunched the Motorola Razr as a foldable smartphone priced at $1,500. They have since been focusing more on higher-end devices and aggressively trying to grow their market share in various countries around the world. Currently, they claim to be number 4 in the global market when you exclude China, where ironically they do not have much of a presence, but they are in 3rd place in the United States, though admittedly it is a distant 3rd behind Apple and Samsung. Finally, going back to the list, I feel like I should at least mention some various other devices sold by the company. Consider that Lenovo is primarily concerned with devices. I mean, when you include the PCs and the smartphones, intelligent devices account for almost 70% of their sales, so logically, some of their $2 billion in annual research and development expenses have gone toward introducing other devices. Many of them wearable devices, like wireless earbuds, smartwatches, and an AI smart ring that they have been developing. But maybe the most significant one is tablets. All the way back in 2005, they released a convertible 2-in-1 type thing, one of the first examples of utilizing the newly acquired ThinkPad branding. And in 2011, they continued using that branding for their first conventional tablets that were a direct response to the Apple iPad that was released about a year earlier. Notably, Lenovo was the first non-Apple option that allowed you to stream Netflix. And really quick, since I brought up the ThinkPads again, I think it is interesting that it celebrated 200 million units sold on its 30th anniversary in 2022, meaning ThinkPad has sold way more units as part of Lenovo than it did as part of IBM. In fact, I'm guessing that most people today do not even realize that it was ever part of IBM. To summarize here, the company that started with a small group of engineers cramped into that little building has come a long way. They have utilized the credibility of classic American brands combined with efficient manufacturing and aggressive marketing to establish a global presence in the markets of PCs, servers, phones, and other devices. All of it comes together to form an impressively large company at this point with a unique story behind it. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts about Lenovo? Do you respect the way that they built their business, or are you upset to see these iconic brands become part of it? There has been a lot of debate over it, especially when the deals were happening, so what do you think about it and the outcomes? And finally, as a consumer, what is your review of their products? Based on your experiences, would you recommend using Lenovo laptops or Motorola phones, or are there better options out there?